Imagine being judged solely by how you look. That's exactly what happened to a successful black man trying to board his first-class flight. As he confidently approached the gate, the agent gave him a once-over and immediately blocked his path, insisting he didn't belong in first class. The air was thick with tension as passengers looked on, some whispering, others pretending not to notice. He calmly explained he had a valid ticket, but the agent's skepticism only grew. What happened next left everyone at the gate stunned and proved why you should never judge someone based on appearances. Who was this man? Why did his identity change everything? And how did this moment turn into a lesson no one there would forget? Stick around as we dive into this eye-opening story that challenges stereotypes and shows the power of grace under pressure. As the man stood there, holding his ticket firmly, the gate agent's dismissive attitude only grew. "Sir, this line is for first-class passengers," she repeated, her tone sharp. He replied calmly, "I know. That's why I'm here." But her skeptical glance told a different story, one laced with doubt and judgment. Around them, the murmurs of other travelers grew louder. Some appeared curious, others uncomfortable, as the situation unfolded in plain view. What made this moment even more tense was how composed the man remained. He didn't raise his voice or argue. He just stood there, waiting for the agent to check his ticket. Who was he? His tailored suit and calm demeanor hinted at a man of importance, but the agent seemed unwilling to acknowledge it. As she hesitated, fumbling with her scanner, passengers began to wonder if there was more to this man than met the eye. The gate agent finally scanned his ticket, her expression shifting from disbelief to something closer to irritation. "This must be a mistake," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear. The man raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting her process the situation on her own. Passengers nearby exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly uncomfortable with how things were unfolding. A few whispered to each other, their curiosity growing with every passing second. Meanwhile, another gate attendant walked over, sensing the growing tension. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone professional but concerned. The first agent held up the ticket. "He's claiming this is his seat," she said, her voice dripping with doubt. The second agent glanced at the man, then back at the ticket. Her eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned, but she didn't say a word. Instead, she leaned in and whispered something to her colleague. Whatever she said left the first agent frozen in place. But rather than apologizing, the agent's face hardened, and she turned back to the man. The air was thick with anticipation, and the entire gate area seemed to be holding its breath. Who was this man, and why was his identity causing such a reaction? The gate area grew silent as the first agent, now visibly flustered, hesitated. She glanced at the man again, her expression a mix of stubbornness and unease. "I need to verify this," she said sharply, her voice breaking the silence. The man stayed calm, nodding slightly but saying nothing. His quiet confidence only seemed to agitate her further. Passengers in the waiting area leaned in, eager to catch every word. Some were visibly frustrated with the delay, while others seemed to sense that something bigger was happening. The second agent stood nearby, her face betraying a hint of nervousness as she watched the scene unfold. It was clear she knew something the others didn't, but for some reason she wasn't stepping in. The first agent stepped away to make a call, her back turned to the man. He used the moment to glance around the room, catching the curious gazes of the crowd. His expression remained composed, almost as if he was used to being underestimated. A child nearby tugged on their parent's sleeve and asked, "Who is that?" The parent shrugged, just as curious as everyone else. When the agent returned, her face was pale, her grip tight around the phone. She didn't look at him directly as she spoke, but her words were sharp. "You need to wait here while I sort this out," she said, though her voice wavered. The tension was at its peak, and everyone in the room could feel it. Whatever she had learned during that phone call, it had shaken her, but she still refused to admit it outright. The man folded his arms, his calm demeanor unshaken, as if he knew this moment was about to take a dramatic turn. All eyes were on him, waiting to see what would happen next. As the gate agent stood there, clutching her phone and avoiding eye contact, the second agent stepped forward. Her tone was softer but firm. "I think we should let him board," she said, her eyes darting between her colleague and the man. The first agent shook her head stubbornly. "Not until I get confirmation," she snapped, her voice growing louder. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of the tension, every passenger now fully invested in what would happen next. Just then, a third figure appeared, a sharply dressed airline supervisor, moving quickly toward the gate. Her presence instantly commanded attention. She glanced at the man, offered a brief, polite nod, and then turned to the gate agent with a serious expression. "Can you explain what's going on here?" she asked. Before the first agent could respond, the supervisor glanced down at the man's ticket. Her eyes flickered with recognition, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned back to the agent, her voice calm but icy. "Do you realize who this is?" she asked quietly, but the edge in her tone was impossible to miss. The agent stammered, clearly caught off guard. I just thought there might have been a mistake. You didn't look." Her words trailed off, and the room seemed to freeze. The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken, as passengers exchanged uneasy looks. The supervisor took a deep breath, visibly holding back frustration. She turned to the man and said, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Please allow me to personally escort you to your seat." But before she could move, the man raised a hand, stopping her. "I appreciate it," he said, his voice calm but firm, "but I'd like to know why this happened in the first place." His words hung in the air, shifting the focus back to the gate agent, whose face had turned bright red. The stakes had just been raised, and no one in the room could look away. The gate agent shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the man's question. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The supervisor, sensing the growing tension, took control. "Sir, I assure you this is not how we treat our passengers. We will be conducting an internal review to address this situation," she said, her tone professional but urgent. But the man didn't move. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Handing it to the agent, he said calmly, "Maybe this will help you understand." Her hands trembled slightly as she read the card, her eyes widening in disbelief. The passengers leaned forward, craning their necks to see what it said. A murmur rippled through the crowd as someone whispered loudly, "He's the CEO of the airline." The agent's face turned ashen as she realized her mistake. "I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely audible. The man gave her a measured look. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You judged me before knowing anything about me. It's not just about me, it's about how you treat everyone." The supervisor stepped in, her tone apologetic. "Mr. Thompson, on behalf of the airline, I deeply apologize. We'll address this immediately." The man finally nodded and turned to the crowd. "Thank you all for your patience," he said with a small smile. As he walked toward the plane, the passengers erupted into applause, some cheering for the way he handled the situation.